Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Diverse Talk Matters. To talk about different things around diversity, equity, inclusion, talk about things that people may find challenges with, so we hope you find them really useful. Some are around people's different lived experiences, some really challenging conversation, things that sometimes we don't need to talk about. But we really hope you enjoy the range of topics that we are introducing to you or bringing to you, to your homes, to your house, to your workplaces. We hope you enjoy. Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Diverse Talk Matters. I'm Tash, the founder director of Diverse Matters, and I'm here with two wonderful guests who will be talking all things around challenges with Black women in uniform service, the police primarily today, and we've got two wonderful guests. I've got Marcia Orr and Karen Geddes. So, hi both.
Hi, Tash.
Hi.
And also what we're going to focus on today is Women in the Shade, which is an organisation you've both set up together, which is going to tell us all a bit about and all the work that you've done and continue to do with Women in the Shade, but that will be a key focus today. So I'm going to start with Karen, just because you're first on my left. I'm looking at the screen. Tell us a little bit of background, a little bit by yourself, and why you joined the wonderful Marcia to create Women in the Shade.
Thank you, and Natasha, for inviting us onto the program this week. I'm going to leave the last bit about the Women in the Shade to Marcia, because I think her explanation about her previous conference would probably align quite nicely with that. So I'm from Wolverhampton via Jamaica. I was brought up in Wolverhampton and went to live in Jamaica when I was younger, came back and lived in Wolverhampton again through the time of Clinton McKirby back in the 80s, the black male that was killed whilst being arrested by police officers in Wolverhampton. Lived through all that, didn't really have an impact on me. I, as I say, grew up in Jamaica, so was used to seeing black people in uniform. I was working in a Kentucky Fried Chicken, so when I saw the advert that asked, could I thought, yes, I was fed up flipping chicken. So let's go flip something else. So I signed up, and in 1992, I headed up to Brighton, the training college. And to my surprise, I arrived to 400 or so other recruits and being one of only two black women in the room. And that has been my journey through policing. And I call it the thin black line, and Marcia will talk about this, where we met back in the days when we were working at Steelhouse Lane in Birmingham. And we were only one of a handful of black female, and that remained a consistent theme. So I did a number of different roles, including chair of the Black and Asian Police Association. I was also on the National Black Police Association as well. And I then transitioned away from policing, not retired sounds so old, in about 3 years ago now, 3 years February coming, it will be when I transitioned away. And I left as the first black female to attain the rank of superintendent within West Midlands Police. Since leaving, I do coaching and mentoring, and most recently, my recent adventure has been Women in the Shade. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Marcia. You can introduce yourself and then talk about Women in the Shade for you.
Thanks, Karen. So, Marcia Orr, I joined West Midlands Police on the 8th of November 1982. I joined as a result of the Scarman report and the riots that took place across the UK, and actually got caught up when they hit Birmingham during that time. My dad was a police officer in Jamaica, and when he came to the UK, he couldn't join. So when Scarman's report came out and saying that we should have a representative police service and police forces were going out of the way to recruit, I joined, and it was like literally 6 weeks before my 20th birthday. And to give some context about how it was, the Sex Discrimination Act had just really been implemented in policing, and so they'd got rid of police women's departments. And so when I joined, you'd find there was one police woman per shift in the force. I did a variety of roles: ethnic minority recruitment officer, managed the first access course to policing in the UK, which the focus was, although nobody was listening, was on ethnic minorities to join the police, because they were presumed not to be able to pass the police initial recruitment test. And actually what happened was there were more white people on the course than there were black people. and Asian people. I was first black woman in force training in West Mids. I did a variety of operational roles. I kind of got involved with the EDI work, was as vice chair of the West Midlands Black and Asian Police Association. I was on the national executive of the Black Police Association with the portfolio of chair of gender and sexual orientation. I was also the first black woman as a Women's Sergeants Federation rep. So in effect, that's the police union, to give people some context. And then after, I think 2001, I think Karen and I were working at the station. We went for promotion. We were 3 black women who got promoted at the same time. And after a couple of years, I transferred to West Mercia Police, where I did the remaining of my service. Custody, I was involved in the Association of Chief Police Officers, looking at career progression of women and ethnic minorities, writing articles for Jane's Police Review for 6 years. And then I transitioned in December 2012. So I've been out of the service for nearly 12 years. And at the moment, I've done a variety of roles in the public and private sector, learning and development, but the last few roles have been heavily around diversity, equity, inclusion, not only in the UK, but also in North America. And in terms of Women in the Shade, I, with another woman who was part of the National Black Police Association, organised the first conference, Women in the Shade, in 2001, which was held at Leicestershire Police. And it was for women of all ethnic minority persuasions. I kept out of policing, if I'll be honest, but I've been watching what's been going on. And so concerned is the word I'd use, that in 2023 wasn't seeing black women visibly represented in the police service. I knew it was happening in other areas, having worked with the military, etc. And I decided to do a series of podcasts, one called Black Women in Policing. And so I reached out to a number of black women I knew that had served, and those I thought had done their 30 years, to talk about their experience. And it was from that conversation, that interview with Karen, we realised that actually there weren't many of us that completed 30 years. That's a worry. And so we decided, what should we do about it? As Karen said, what should we do? So we decided to organise a conference. And that's where Women in the Shade was born, really.
Lovely. See, I didn't realise it was that new. So it's quite a newish, in the last couple of years type of development. Look how much, how much many people know about it. That's brilliant. So was it, Marcia, you said your dad was a police officer. Was that your inspiration in terms of going into the police? Or were there other reasons why you wanted to enter into police then?
I'll be honest. My mum was a nurse. My family were involved in nursing and NHS. Yeah. And it was what was expected of a black woman. And I don't think I've ever done anything that is expected of me. So why was I going to have a career that was any different? And the policing appealed to me because it was different, and it's about a challenge, but it's also about representing and having a voice for your community. And it was difficult at the time because you weren't necessarily welcome in the police station, and you weren't necessarily welcome by some of the black community who felt you sold out. So it was really difficult. Don't regret it, but it was difficult. And I don't think sometimes people understand how difficult it is. And we haven't even thrown in being a woman.
Exactly. So you get it from both sides. And we're going to talk about it a little bit later on, actually, as well. So, Karen, you mentioned you're in, is it KFC? And you thought you saw a poster. But what? I'm going to go into this police. That looks interesting. Yeah. Is there any particular reason, apart from getting out of KFC, you thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a good shot? Because like what Marcia just said, you knew it was going to be a challenge. You know it wasn't going to be an easy situation.
No, I didn't know it was going to be a challenge, and I didn't know it was going to be a hard situation. I tried to go into the armed forces and they rejected me. I just had an attraction to uniform. I don't know why. My mum also wanted me to go into nursing, and I did a stint on a ward in New Cross Hospital in Wolverhampton. And I thought, there's no way in hell I'm going to do that. So I drifted, and I was at a managerial position in KFC, and I was looking for something different to do. So it wasn't that I left school and I wanted to build policing. I didn't have a family member. I had had no interactions with policing. I have a twin brother. He got stopped occasionally, and he'd say it was his fault because he was speeding. So, and he was always treated with respect. So I had no negative perception of policing or the impact. So when I signed up, to me, it was an adventure. It was a job that sung to me, that appealed to my need to get involved in helping people. And I just thought, why not? And that's how I came to drift into policing, basically.
Brilliant. And, going a little bit back to what Marcia said, because, there are, and I'm glad you give your perspective. And this shows that not everybody's perspective of the police from a Black experience is the same. And, you talked, actually, your family hadn't had that many negative experiences, but we know that isn't the case for everybody. Did you expanded on what both of you have said, you mentioned about, challenges from the Black community. You want to tell people, I'll start with Marcia first, but do you want to tell people about that experience in terms of the challenges? Because as we know, I know many people in my family, if I said I was going to go on the police, they'd be like, what are you thinking about? So tell me about the challenge you had from both Black and other communities.
I think it was mainly, some of it was shock. We're talking 1982. The riots hadn't long happened, and there we were. And people had, there were communities, Black communities had a negative experience with the police. So they did see us as, people like me, as sellouts. I've been called a coconut and a bounty bar. And then in terms of internally in the police, you've got to think about the culture. They just had women join them on the shift in cars, and then they had people who didn't look like them. And they really weren't prepared or geared up for it. And I must say, I don't think I was really prepared and geared up with. I naively thought, oh, well, going to be welcomed. And I'm not saying everybody was negative by any sense, but it wasn't. It was a challenge.
What about yourself, Karen, in terms of any discussions from or any issues around people you join in from the Black community again? What do you do? Anything that came up for you?
So my mom, God rest her soul, she's gone now. She was proud as hell. She had a doctor, she had a lawyer, she had teachers. Now she had a police officer. So for her, there was never any pushback from my family side. And I think again, it goes back around to I didn't understand the perception of policing within the Black community. I suppose it was in a bubble until I joined. And the pushback started when I joined the organisation. And it came from the community. And similar to Marcia, being called a bounty, being told you shouldn't be in the uniform, going to training college at Brighton, and the hat, I had an afro then. The hat wasn't designed for the afro hair. So it kept springing up on the hair. So the uniform wasn't even designed to accommodate us as a Black woman. You think of the photograph of Angela Davis and her afro. It wasn't designed to accommodate our natural self. And the commandant, the highest ranking person in the training college, he couldn't even tell the difference between myself and another, and I call her Black, she's a mixed heritage. He couldn't tell the difference between us. Even though I'm darker skinned, she was lighter skinned. So definitely Marcia's experience there, they weren't ready for us. And the expectation was that we would be ready for them. And by that, what I mean, we would assimilate to their way of doing things. And that ability to be your authentic self from day one, you could tell that was never going to be an option.
And how did you navigate that then? In terms, you thought it wasn't going to be an option.
How do you navigate it? Well, you're young and you're young in service. And I was, like I say, I was young in terms of my identity and who I was. So you try really hard. So, I had braids, and although they were unusual, at least my hat could go on. But depending on where my bun was, depends on whether I could move my neck or not, or it was hitting my collar of my shirt. So there's all that. But it's also about things that weren't expected of you because of who you were. And I remember conversation in the canteen over breakfast, as you did, people play cards and chat, and people talking about their career aspirations. And I said, naively and stupidly, my career aspiration was that I wanted to do my 30 years and I wanted to be an inspector by the time I retired. And I was told in no uncertain terms it was never going to happen. The average length of service for a policewoman was 7 years. And, well, I was black. So it was like I learned very quickly there were certain things I wasn't going to say and certain conversations that I just would sit and not partake in. But after a while, it ate at me. And after about 8 years, Marcia's voice came out and I started to say what I thought and what I felt and what I was experiencing.
And for me, so when I went in, I was what I describe as a mature lady. So I'd gone out in the world, I'd done work, I knew myself, and I was comfortable in who I was. So it's important for me I always said I wanted to leave policing as I came into policing. And by that, I mean my values, how I live my life. I've never drank, and policing was one of the areas I thought said, you need to drink, Karen. And to this day, I don't drink. So being authentic and being myself was really important to me. But you had to learn to adapt to that dual identity that we talk about being black in the uniform and black outside the uniform, which a lot of people didn't understand until recently. And also, when we talk about going sergeants or up the rank as black female, you became the accidental role model. So your specialist subject became about race. And that also had an impact on your ability to go up the rank, because when you're in senior leadership meetings, they didn't ask you about strategic issues. They would ask you about race, and that would become your value within the department as well. But for me, that navigation was also the Black Nation Police Association, and being comfortable in finding people that looked like me and being part of that organization. And that navigation then became about being visible in the conversation about race. It would have been easy to remain silent. It would have been a lot better for my career. And Marcia will say this is to remain silent. But it was important to challenge the status quo, challenge the system, because I wouldn't feel like I was being my authentic self if I just accepted the situation as it was.
So a couple of things you've mentioned. One about the experiences, obviously, back then, and you were told there's no way you're going to be an inspector, even down to, you can't even have your own hair as you want it. There's so many things there. Educate me, because what is it like now for somebody, a black woman entering the force now? What do you see what has changed and what hasn't changed?
Yeah. So I think what's changed, the younger people nowadays going into the organisation are more comfortable with who they are. And they're unapologetic about being themselves. So it wouldn't be a surprise now to go in and see a policewoman, black woman with dreads. It's not a surprise to see them with their natural hair and being able to be comfortable in doing that. But I think there is still challenges around them remaining in the organisation, progressing within the organisation. There's never been a black female chief constable. We've had a couple of high-ranking black females, and that has been it. Our numbers are dwindling because we're still not being recruited into the organisation. And one of the reasons behind that is it's not a safe space for black women to thrive. And that's not a nuance to policing. I think if you take this conversation and put it into nursing or army, fire, it would be a similar conversation. And that perhaps comes back round to the Women in the Shade and why we started Women in the Shade. Because we recognise that we need to empower ourselves to move from victim to being the architect for our own future. And how do we do that? By having conversation that's meaningful to us. So yes, the numbers have changed. Yes, you see more people who are natural in their state, but the challenges that we endured, and that's a strong word, I'm going to use endured, still remain, I think. And that's what we're hearing from people in the organisation at the moment.
And that for me, Tash, is quite sad when I think about when I joined in 1982 and left in 2012 to hear the same experiences in terms of the progression and the value that black women bring to their organisations. I think it's a damning indictment on the organisations, but also on society, and we see that across the board.
But I'm not surprised that it's remained the same, because it's never been focused on, it's never been prioritised. So that lens has never been put on it. So how could it have changed if nobody's actually bothered to look at it in any detail?
Yeah, and we say we're unapologetically talking about black women, and it's uncomfortable for a lot of people. They want us to be women of colour. Yeah, I'm a woman of colour, but I'm also a black woman. And when you lump us all together, then you don't actually see or look at the experiences that we have that are different to others. You know, the gender agenda and the race agenda has not benefited black women, period.
I think a lot of this, I mean, sadly, this happens in uniformed services, but there's loads of research and data that happens for black women, period, full stop, in all sectors, isn't it? Which is the sad part of it as well. Have you ever had, black women approach you and say, and I'm sure you do, because we're going to talk about the conference later anyway, but people approach you and say, God, how did you find it? What advice would you give to somebody thinking, I'm going to enter the black police force or any other uniformed service as a black woman? What advice would you give them?
Say, know yourself, first of all. And I would also say, do your research about the organisation, and so your eyes are open into what to expect, because I was blindsided by some of the behaviours and the treatment. And knowledge is power, and if you can connect with black women in uniform or in the same service, then there's nothing like a good mentor.
And I'd agree that understanding of self-worth and self-belief is really important, that empowering yourself with understanding the history of the organisation that you're going into. Try and find allies and advocates within the organisation that you can align with, and also know the people who aren't advocating on your behalf. And how do you navigate conversations and train yourself to navigate conversation within that environment as well? But also recognize the impact and acknowledge the impact that it can have on you. One of the things that we're focusing on the conference is around mental health, and how the intersectionality of being a black woman in organizations such as the police can have a detrimental impact on your mental health. So learn how to ask for help, and don't just go close it off and be by yourself. There are plenty of organizations within police that do that, but also have your network outside policing as well, so that you can go and be your authentic self away from the job. Policing is just a finite amount of time. The person that's important and remains important is you.
Of course, definitely. Perfect. Thank you. And, you both mentioned how, Karen, you said you were somebody who was like, people only ask you about race, or so often, somebody who is from an underrepresented group is the one in every magazine, every article, is the poster person, but deep down they're doing...
Been there.
Should get you a little magazine covers. Right.
Yes, been there. There was one, I forget, it was in the 90s. I was at work still in the House Lane as an acting sergeant. And there was one that was looking at black women in uniform services, and I was one of those black women. I think it was Essence magazine.
Of course you were.
Yeah. So yeah.
Bearing that in mind, and some people might go, well, is it really that bad? What really? Because, sadly, two things. In a good way, people are starting to realise there are issues in the police, because some people wouldn't even believe how things happen. And I remember when I saw you last time, you told me a story, and I'm trying to remember it. What barriers and stereotypes did you encounter?
It's important to balance the conversation, because for me, I'm proud to have done 30 years within policing, because it's the job that enabled me to serve my community. So, I'm proud to have been able to do that. And a couple of things that I kept from my time within policing, apart from siphoning off a couple of bits of uniform, was a letter from a young lady that I was able to help, and simply says thank you. And I cherish that with pride. I'm proud to have been able to serve my community. There are times when I would walk down in Handsworth or Wolverhampton, and a black person would simply come up and hug me, because they were proud to see me in uniform. So and I'm proud of my achievements as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I went to West Mercia, I was the only black woman above the rank of PC. and I was working Worcester Town Centre on the beat in uniform, and I got a radio message asking me to go back into the nick. They wanted to speak to me, and when I went in, they said they'd had a 999 call because there was a black woman impersonating a police officer, a police sergeant, and it was me. And I laughed. It was 2003. I laughed. The team laughed. But that shows the impact you can have on communities that aren't ready for you. And somebody who's in policing now, who we met last year, told me that she saw me years ago and wanted to join the police, but her mum wasn't very supportive of it. But eventually she joined the police, and she joined the police because she saw me walking the beat and went, well, she's doing it. So there is that. I mean, in terms of the things that and I don't say I regret, but made me think. I mean, I didn't go for promotion for years because I didn't want to be the force wanted, the first black woman sergeant. I didn't want to be it. I didn't want it. We're already visible. We're visible and invisible. I joined the police to be a police officer, period. And I wanted to do that. And so I waited till I got 19 years service. I'd done a lot of things, got a lot of skills, taken the national police exam, all the rest of it, and thought no one, naively, is going to say, you're a diversity hire. And somebody said to me, one of the first things I said was, you only got promoted because you're a black woman. And it was like, well, I've just done 19 years. I've got this CV that's not bad. I've taken the national police exam like every other officer. And you're still saying that? So I think there is that as well. It's about actually being able to brush that off. So part of me is like, if I'd have known someone was going to ask me that 19 years later, I might have just done it a bit earlier. But you're ready when you're ready, and I was ready then.
Yeah, no, lovely. And this is that thing about proving yourself. You've got all those qualifications and still your questions, but yeah, we'd all change things, I think, if we went back a little bit and maybe tweaked it a little bit to be a bit more forthright. I mean, I definitely would. I wish I had in lots of situations.
I think one of the things people need to understand that when you're a minority within a minority, you can stick out. You can walk in the room and look around and go, oh, okay, it's just me again. Because then you understand the environment. I know one of my proudest moments in my police career, and I broke down and cried, was when the National Black Police Association was launched, and it was launched in Birmingham. And I had never seen so many black and brown people in uniform at various ranks in my life. And let me tell you something, that inspired me. I was like, oh, you're not alone. There's not a few of us. Okay, we're spread geographically, but actually there's quite a few of us here. And that was really interesting. And I remember there was a few chief officers, and there were 6 of them, and they were huddled together in the room. And I went over them and I said to them, I think you now understand what it's like for us. Because you could see the uncomfortableness of being the only people that were, very few people that were white in the room. And that was quite something. And also the fact that, when you're seeing so many people, black and brown people, what are you like, wow, and it's inspiration. And the work you're doing is going to also support others coming into the force as well, or the uniformed service. They could go, wow, you've done it. You had highs and lows, but a lot of highs actually. You didn't, you were in the force for so long, and look at what you're doing now. So I'm hoping that will also encourage other people, because as you know, and you work within this even now, there's a lot of police forces have got targets, haven't they? And other services, like you talked earlier, there's NHS, military, all those sort of organisations have got targets to address, underrepresentation. What are your thoughts on that? So whether it's how they do it, because sometimes I know there are challenges, and we've had discussions ourselves about more needs to be done and more action rather than, to make a real change. Any thoughts on that? I'll start with you, Karen, and then Marcia.
Yeah, so I think it's important to stress that we're not looking to seek to uplift the representation of black women within policing or other organisations. We're not a recruitment agent. We are here for black women within those organisations. But I think what I see from recruitment and targets is that they come just numbers. And then once you hit the numbers, there's no strategy to welcome them in the organization. If I was a new recruit and I had dyslexia, there would be a workplace plan in place for me to be able to adapt and survive within the organization. That same lens needs to perhaps be applied to women of color and Black women coming into the organization. So buddying, sort of career pathways, what does that look like? I don't see any strategy that recognizes that we are at risk of being eradicated from policing. So what are you going to do to make sure that we uplift that number specifically? I see strategies around recruiting BAME, women of color, ethnic minority, but nothing that drills down specifically into Black women. And also, I don't see any clear transparency or oversight of this area within policing. So let's recruit, but where is the accountability around that, how those persons are welcome into the organization, allowed to stay in the organization, allowed to rise within the organization and leave of their own accord rather than being driven outside the organization. So clear data set, clear transparency. And one of the things that we're doing at Women in the Shade as well is research, because we want to come in from a position of learning. Yeah, they do research. And because there's a finite number of Black women, then the research will say we are insignificant. The question should then be why, but the researchers don't then go back and ask that question. So we need to have greater understanding of what are the blockages preventing Black women from going into policing? What are the blockages preventing them from staying in policing? And how can we build an organization that welcomes Black police women and so that they can feel that is something that's there for them?
Policing and other organisations are using the same playbook that they've used for decades. Diversity, recruit. Diversity, recruit. Diversity, recruit. Like us being in the organisation, by our mere presence, by osmosis, is going to change the culture in an organisation. And that isn't the case. And so I agree with Karen. There needs to be a strategy. I mean, one of the things that we've looked at, the Police Race Action Plan, it talks about Black people, but it break it down, you know? You can talk about women of colour in policing, but what about the different ethnic groups within that large cohort? Because their experience will be different. And the fact that we're viewed as statistically insignificant to research means that you don't value us and you don't care. So if this is what academia, if this is how you get research funding, then it's not just about policing, it's about the wider ecosystem that's feeding in. And when are we really going to learn from lessons learned, which is a phrase I've heard so many times from so many reviews in so many organisations? It's like, okay, you said lessons we're going to learn. Show us, because we're not seeing it.
Yeah, definitely. So true. Because sometimes, you know, I'll be in a meeting, they'll go, we're going to do this. And I'm like, well, we haven't done anything from the last lessons learned. Oh, the last 20, 30 years of evidence is telling us the same thing. So actually, you know, why are we doing it again? Because it's not going to tell you anything different. Just get on and do something. Now, I totally hear you there. Let's talk about Women in the Shade conference, because I think it'd be good for people to hear about your conference and what you did last year. Well, this year, keep getting the years mixed up, what you did earlier this year, and then what you're planning to do next year. So if anybody who doesn't know, give us a little, overview of what happened and what the conference was about, what you did this year. And you said a little bit more about the plans, because you said about wellbeing and mental health.
So I'll go first. So last year's conference was held in January this year, which is why it seems like we've achieved so much. This is why we keep saying last year. But it was in Birmingham, and I've got to give a big shout out to allies and advocates such as BT, who enable us to be able to hold the conference by allowing us to use their space. Gavin Stevens from the NPCC, who, when we approached him about the idea, didn't say, I don't see the need. He said, how can I help you? Which was really good. So we had a wealth of different speakers within the room, from academical people, from facilitators talking about Black women's experience within the organisation, keynote speakers such as Nina Smallman. If anybody that hasn't read her story, she's the lady whose 2 daughters was brutally murdered in the metropolitan area. and then the Met Police officers then further abused their tragic loss by taking pictures and distributing them. So the day went really great, more powerful than we ever imagined. We had about 160 delegates in the room, really uplifting experience. You could see the impact. And just going back to Marcia's commentary about when the Black Police Association was launched, just that physical presence of being in the room with people that look like you. And you didn't have to over-explain yourself. If you said something, somebody was beside you nodding because they understood. So it was really, really powerful. And then, as Marcia said before, once it wasn't even finished, people were then asking what we were going to do. And in between that, we've developed a strategy that we call the ACE model. And we've been working on different things such as research and also looking at collaborative opportunities with other organizations, trying to uplift our presence within community as well, because we want to have a mixed, rich voice at the next conference. And then on the 16th of January, and I'll hand it over to Marcia, next year, we're going to be coming back for conference number 2.
And one of the things I'm proud of that what we did, we enabled women, Black women, who are not progressed their career and may not financially be able to afford to go to conference. We were able to make it affordable. And so we had officers younger in service, people from even the fire service and other services who were younger in service that they were able to afford to come if they weren't sponsored by their force. 16th of January, we're talking about and I have to think about it, the colour of power. We're talking about power and what happens, decisions that's made when we're not in the room. And we've got quite a focus as well on mental health well-being for Black women in these services, because particularly, and I'm not saying it isn't different for different services, there are some jobs that are, regardless of who you are stressful, and they are hard, let alone be in an environment that might be so conducive to someone who looks like you. So we're going to talk about that, and it's about empowering, it's about having those honest conversations, and it's about giving women the strengths and resources to be able to think about their environment, how they're going to navigate it, and maybe, in some respects, what they can do to influence what's going on in their organisation from a Black female's perspective. So it's about getting Black women's voices heard, getting their contributions valued and acknowledged.
It's important to say that whilst our target audience remains unapologetically Black women within uniform services, the conference is open to anybody. We particularly would love to see community representatives within the room, because we want to have, and also leaders as well, and men, and Black men as well.
Wow.
We want to have a rich conversation, because and I don't like the word solution, because there's probably that suggests an end game, but the aspiration is to make sure that we build something that has the potential to outlast us and remain the legacy going forward that will empower more Black women. And that's why we're doing this. We could have taken a back seat.
Okay.
We could have gone and did our retirement and gone and look after my kids.
Okay.
You know, the artwork behind me, I've got an 11-year-old daughter that I'm sort of looking after. So we are here because we're passionate about this subject matter. So, come and join us. You can get details about the conference on our website, www.womenintheshade.com, or email us at info@womenintheshade.com.
Lovely, thank you very much. Is there anything we haven't drawn out today that you'd like to mention or add? Anything to do about Black women in uniform service, or anything else about Women in the Shade?
I think
Yeah.
I'd like to say that as a police officer, you are exposed to so much. You learn so much. You have so many skills that sometimes you don't realise the skills that you've developed over the years. And I think that's something I would say to Black women in uniform services. Think about your value. Do your audit and go, what's your contribution look like? So the next time somebody may challenge you or question your ability, you've articulated it. You know your worth, and that's really, really important.
Yeah. And I'd like to say, I said it before, I'm proud of what I've done, and likewise proud of Marcia's achievements and other Black ladies that we've spoken to who managed to do 30 years. I would love to see others come. And for me, I want people to be making an informed decision rather than a decision being made on their behalf. And don't dismiss the organization without doing your homework. And then if you say it's not for you, that's fine. It's not for you. Or in the organization and you want to be there, look at ways of uplifting yourself and securing your health and well-being to make sure that you thrive. You are worthy. We can do it. This term imposter syndrome, I hate it.
Yeah,
we are
me
neither
too.
imposters and we don't have a syndrome. We're not sick.
Yeah.
We are more than capable. We are more than able to do that. So let's start being that change that we want to see and drive the agenda. Reclaim that narrative. We're not victims. We are architects of our future.
Yes, sir.
Love it. Thank you. Anything else? I see you nodding ferociously there, Marcia.
I think for a long time, some of us, and I talk about myself, thought we'd be helped and supported in some ways. I'm not saying I haven't been helped and supported, but actually we need to take control of our lives and our careers. We really do.
Yeah,
Definitely.
And just so I just want to pick up on that point for Marcia. There are plenty of people that I could give a holler out for who've been supportive, and those have been white, male, female. So they are advocates within these organizations as well. So, they know who they are. For me personally, and without them, the days sometimes I've cried in cupboards, cried on shoulders, and I will always remember those shoulders that were there to lift me up and say, Karen, you were worthy. So a big shout out to those people within the organization who go that extra mile to be that advocate for somebody like me when I'm not in the room as well.
And my quick story is, when I changed my direction of my career, it was a superintendent who sat down with me because I'd just been turned down for a job. I wanted to go into plain clothes. And he said to me, made me a cup of tea, we had a chat, and he said, what's your plan? And I went, what do you mean plan? Have you got a plan? And he talked to me about a plan, and I'm not kidding you, within months of having that, weeks in fact, having that conversation, I moved jobs, and I moved deliberately every 2 to 3 years. Sometimes I'd arrive and people say, you're going to be here now for a while because you're a Black woman, blah, 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 blah. And I said, no, I'm not. And I moved. And so I really do think you can be destiny of your career. You just need to think about your plan and how you're going to navigate it and have a plan A, B, C, and D, and maybe an F if the others don't work.
Exactly. There's always a way to get there. You might take a bit longer or do a different route, but you can definitely get there.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you both. That's been absolutely fabulous. Thank you for telling us all about experience, but also about Women in the Shade. As we said, everybody, there's a conference in January. Please do go on the website and find out. Even if you can't go, keep up to date. I think you can keep up to date with what's going on, and maybe even come to the one after that. But if you look on the website, there is that information there that will keep you posted. So
yeah, Natasha, you just reminded me. On the subject of advocates, etc., we are keen to find sponsors for the conference or friends of Women in the Shade. So even if you got a little bit of £500 in your pocket that you want the taxman or taxwoman not to get, go on the website. You can see it's opportunities to sponsor us and be part of the conversation in a different way.
Lovely. Thank you. Be an active ally, people. Anybody out there, if they have budgets, if they're able to support this really needed agenda, get in touch with Karen and Marcia. Karen and Marcia, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
Until
Tash.
next time, and everybody, hope you enjoyed listening to the podcast. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Please do spread the word about our channel and tune in for our next episode.